How many times will they hurt you? That's the question that sits heavy in your chest. You already know the answer, though. As many times as you let them. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's the truth. These patterns don't change because you hope they will. They don't shift because you're kind, patient, forgiving, or willing to bend yourself into knots. They continue because you keep showing up to the cycle. You keep giving another chance, and another, and another. And each time, you hand them the tools they need to wound you again. It's easy to tell yourself that this time will be different. That maybe they've learned, maybe they've reflected, maybe all the apologies and promises finally mean something. But deep down, you've seen the cycle enough to know better. The honeymoon phase, the charm, the temporary calm, it never lasts. The storm always comes back, and every time it does, you're left feeling smaller, more doubtful, more disconnected from yourself. Here's the thing: they don't see your pain the way you do. They don't carry the weight of your sleepless nights, the anxiety that coils in your stomach, the second guessing of your worth. To them, your forgiveness is permission, your silence is agreement, your hope is their power. And that's why the question isn't about how many times they'll hurt you. It's about how many times you're willing to hand them access to you. I know what you're thinking. Walking away isn't easy. It's complicated. There are ties, obligations, memories, maybe even love. But every single time you rationalize staying, you're teaching yourself to tolerate the intolerable. You're telling yourself your needs don't matter as much as the peace you're trying to keep, and that kind of self-abandonment leaves scars. The truth is, you deserve relationships where you don't have to beg for basic decency. You deserve connections where your joy doesn't hinge on someone else's mood or approval. And yet, when you stay in the loop of hurt, you start to normalize the chaos. You start believing that love is supposed to feel like walking on eggshells, that affection is conditional, that your worth is negotiable. That's not love. That's survival mode. And survival mode is exhausting. It drains you. It leaves you hypervigilant, always waiting for the next blow, the next cutting comment, the next withdrawal of affection. And the saddest part is, in the middle of that survival mode, you lose sight of yourself. Your laughter, your dreams, your light. They all dim under the weight of trying to keep someone else happy. So how many times will they hurt you? As many times as it takes for you to decide you've had enough. As many times as you're willing to trade your peace for the illusion of connection. But there comes a moment, sometimes quiet, sometimes explosive, when you realize you can't keep doing it. That the cost to your soul is too high. That the little voice inside you, the one that's been whispering all along, is no longer willing to be ignored. That moment is powerful, because that's when you stop asking, will they change? And start asking, what do I need? And when you start putting your needs, your safety, your sanity first, that's when things begin to shift. That's when you reclaim the power you've been giving away. It's not about being cruel. It's not about revenge. It's about boundaries. It's about saying, I matter. My feelings matter. My peace matters. And boundaries are not for them. They're for you. They're the line you draw so that you stop betraying yourself. And yes, it will hurt to walk away. It will ache to release the fantasy of what you wanted them to be. But staying hurts too. Over and over again. The difference is, one kind of hurt is the pain of loss, and the other is the pain of erosion. One is sharp but temporary. The other grinds you down day after day until you don't recognize yourself. So, the real question isn't how many times they'll hurt you. The real question is, how many times will you let them? At what point do you decide your healing is worth more than their chaos? At what point do you trust yourself enough to step into a life where love doesn't come with bruises on your spirit? You have that choice. You always have. They will hurt you as many times as you allow. That statement can feel jarring, even unfair, because it almost sounds like you're to blame. But that's not what this means. This isn't about fault. It's about reality. The truth is, people who thrive on control, manipulation, or disregard for your feelings don't wake up one day and suddenly decide to change because you've been patient or forgiving. They continue the cycle because they can. Because every time they hurt you and you stay, you're giving them silent permission to repeat the same behavior again. It's not conscious consent. It's not what you want. But from their perspective, your tolerance is acceptance. Think about it every time they lash out, dismiss your needs, twist your words, or withhold affection. There's a fork in the road. They show you exactly who they are in that moment. And when you smooth it over, when you downplay it, when you say, maybe I'm overreacting, what they learn is that their actions have no consequence. You'll still be there. You'll still pick up the phone. You'll still make excuses for them, to yourself, and to others. And that's how the cycle cements itself. Because you've taught them, unintentionally, that hurting you doesn't mean losing you. This isn't about weakness. It's about hope. You're not staying because you enjoy the pain. You're staying because you're hoping that the good moments, the charm, the glimpses of kindness are real. You're hoping that if you hang in long enough, they'll finally see your worth, finally soften, finally give you the love you deserve. But what actually happens is that your hope becomes the very thing that keeps you tethered to the hurt. Hope can be a beautiful force in healthy relationships, but in toxic ones, it becomes a trap. The hardest part to accept is that they don't see your forgiveness the way you think they do. To you, forgiving is an act of love, of compassion, of commitment. To them, it's leverage. It tells them that they can push the limits, break the trust, chip away at you, and you'll still come back. The more times you let it happen, the more entrenched the cycle becomes. And after a while, you start doubting yourself more than you doubt them. You question your reactions, your boundaries, your expectations. You tell yourself, maybe this is just how relationships are. And that's the dangerous part, because once you normalize being hurt, you stop fighting for the love and respect you deserve. Every time they hurt you and you stay, it doesn't just damage your trust in them. It erodes your trust in yourself. You start to believe that maybe you can't make strong decisions. You wonder if your standards are too high. You feel guilty for even wanting more. That's the deeper harm. It's not only about what they do to you, but what you start doing to yourself. You shrink. You silence your voice. You become a smaller version of who you are to keep the peace, to keep them from leaving, to keep the illusion alive. And yet, the pattern is predictable. They will hurt you as long as it works for them, as long as they can take without giving, criticize without consequence, control without resistance. It's not about whether they love you. It's about whether the dynamic benefits them. And if it does, why would they ever stop? That's why this line, they'll hurt you as many times as you allow, matters so much. because it puts the focus back where you actually have power on your choices, not theirs. You cannot control what they do. You cannot make them suddenly become empathetic, consistent, or kind. But you can control what you allow. You can control whether you keep showing up to the same fight, the same apology, the same cycle that leaves you broken. You can control whether you accept their version of love or decide that your peace matters more. And that choice, painful, terrifying, complicated as it is the turning point. Every time you allow the hurt, the cycle deepens. Every time you say, "Not this time," and hold that boundary, you begin to reclaim yourself. It doesn't mean you stop loving. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop sacrificing your dignity, your sanity, and your spirit for someone who has shown you over and over again that they will keep hurting you if you let them. So when you hear the words, "They'll hurt you as many times as you allow," don't take it as blame. Take it as clarity. Take it as the truth that frees you from waiting for them to change and empowers you to change what you allow. Because the cycle isn't broken by their transformation, it's broken by your decision. Hope and forgiveness don't change the pattern. That's one of the hardest truths to swallow because hope feels noble, forgiveness feels healing, and we are told over and over again that both are necessary in relationships. And yes, in healthy relationships, they absolutely are. Hope is what allows us to believe in growth and possibility. Forgiveness is what allows us to move forward after mistakes. But in toxic cycles, hope and forgiveness get weaponized. They stop being bridges to connection and start becoming chains that keep you tied to pain. Think of how many times you've clung to hope after an apology. They said the right words, maybe even showed some remorse in the moment. You wanted so badly to believe that this time was different. You convinced yourself that the tears, the promises, the late night confessions were real. And in that moment, you gave them another chance. But what happened? Slowly, the charm faded, the attentiveness disappeared, and before long, the same behaviors resurfaced. It wasn't different. It was just the same cycle wrapped in temporary sweetness. Forgiveness works the same way. You forgave because you didn't want to carry anger, because you wanted to heal, because you wanted to preserve the relationship. But what did they do with that forgiveness? They used it as proof that you'd never really leave. They took it as assurance that no matter how badly they behaved, you'd find a way to excuse it. Forgiveness became a free pass instead of a reset. And instead of the relationship growing stronger, it stayed exactly the same, because they had no incentive to change. That's the cruel irony. The very qualities that make you compassionate, loyal, and resilient are the same qualities that keep you stuck. Your ability to hope, to forgive, to see the best in someone, that's not weakness. That's your strength. But when that strength is poured into someone who doesn't value it, it becomes your trap. You end up giving chance after chance, pouring out grace that isn't reciprocated, and waiting for a transformation that never comes. And with each cycle, you start bargaining with yourself. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe everyone deserves another chance. And while those thoughts come from kindness, they blind you to the reality in front of you. Patterns don't lie. When someone shows you the same hurtful behaviors again and again, no amount of hope or forgiveness will rewrite that truth. It's important to understand that people don't change because you love them harder. They don't change because you forgive them more quickly. They don't change because you're endlessly hopeful. People change when they choose to, when they are willing to confront themselves, when they see a reason to be accountable. If that willingness isn't there, then no amount of your love can create it. That's the heartbreak. You cannot do the work for them. You can only do the work for yourself. So what happens when you keep hoping in spite of the evidence? You stay stuck in a cycle of highs and lows. The highs feel intoxicating because they seem like glimpses of the person you wish they could be. The lows feel crushing because they confirm the reality you don't want to face. And forgiveness becomes the bridge you keep crossing back to them, even when you know the road leads nowhere new. That back and forth erodes your trust in yourself. You start to believe your instincts are wrong, because every time you sense the truth, you override it with hope. Every time you feel anger, you smother it with forgiveness. This is why the cycle doesn't break. Hope keeps you waiting. Forgiveness keeps you returning. And the pattern keeps repeating, because nothing on their end has actually shifted. The apologies are words, the gestures are temporary, but the underlying disregard remains the same. And if nothing changes, nothing changes. That doesn't mean hope and forgiveness are wrong. They are beautiful tools when used wisely. But they have to be paired with accountability. Hope only works when it's backed by consistent action. Forgiveness only works when it's honored by genuine change. Without those pieces, both hope and forgiveness become empty gestures. Ones that cost you your peace and allow the cycle to continue. So when you find yourself holding on to hope, ask, am I hoping for who they are or for who I want them to be? When you offer forgiveness, ask, is this forgiveness bringing growth? Or is it buying more time for the same behavior to resurface? Those questions are where your power lies. Because the truth is, hope and forgiveness don't change the pattern. But your clarity about how you use them can change your choices. Boundaries are not about them, but about you. That's something people struggle with, because when you think about boundaries, you often imagine them as walls you put up to control someone else's behavior. You think, if I set this limit, maybe they'll finally act differently. Maybe they'll finally treat me the way I deserve. But that's not what boundaries are. Boundaries are not tools to change another person. They are guides for how you choose to exist in the relationship, how you choose to protect your peace, and how you decide what you will and will not allow. They are not for controlling anyone else. They are for protecting yourself. The reason boundaries feel so hard in toxic relationships is because the other person has conditioned you to believe that your needs are too much, that your limits are unreasonable, or that setting a boundary makes you selfish or unloving. They've trained you to equate boundary setting with conflict. So, instead of drawing lines, you bend. You compromise until you're twisted into someone you barely recognize. And in that bending, you lose sight of the truth. That your needs are valid, that your well-being matters, that boundaries are not cruelty, but care. When you finally begin to set boundaries, it can feel terrifying, because boundaries force clarity. They make you acknowledge what is and isn't acceptable. And once you've said it out loud, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending that the behavior is fine. A boundary means you're telling yourself, I refuse to abandon myself for the sake of keeping this relationship intact. And that can feel radical, especially if you've been conditioned to put everyone else's comfort above your own. What happens when you set a boundary with someone who thrives on control? They push back. They resist. They test you. They might guilt you, shame you, or punish you with silence. Because your boundary threatens the dynamic that benefits them. When you say, no, when you say, this doesn't work for me, you are essentially saying, you don't get unlimited access to me anymore. And for someone who has been accustomed to having that power, that's intolerable. So yes, the pushback comes. And that's why so many people abandon their boundaries. They mistake the other person's resistance for proof that they were wrong to set it in the first place. But that resistance is actually confirmation that the boundary is necessary. If the only way to keep the peace is to keep sacrificing your needs, then you're not in peace. You're in surrender. Boundaries expose that truth. They force you to see the reality that this person benefits when you abandon yourself, and they get angry when you don't. And while that may hurt, it also empowers you. Because once you see it, you cannot deny it. Boundaries are the ultimate act of self-respect. They're you saying, I am no longer available for the cycle of hurt. I am no longer available for manipulation, dismissal, or cruelty. I am available for relationships where my dignity remains intact. Boundaries don't guarantee that the other person will respect them, but they guarantee that you will respect yourself. And that's where the shift happens. People often confuse boundaries with ultimatums. An ultimatum is about controlling someone else. If you do this, then I'll do that. A boundary is different. A boundary is, if this behavior continues, here is what I will do to take care of myself. It's not about punishing. It's about protecting. It's not about getting them to act differently. It's about creating a space where you don't keep betraying yourself. The truth is, without boundaries, you end up living reactively. You wake up every day bracing for what the other person might do, say, or demand. You live on their terms, not yours. Boundaries flip that. They allow you to live proactively. They give you a framework for your energy, your time, your emotional investment. They anchor you in the reality that your worth isn't determined by how much you endure, but by how clearly you honor yourself. And yes, boundaries can mean loss. They can mean stepping away when someone refuses to respect them. But that's the beauty of it. Boundaries give you a choice. They give you the ability to say, I am not trapped here. I am not powerless. I get to decide how much of myself I am willing to give and under what conditions. That's not selfish. That's survival. That's self-preservation. So remember, boundaries are not about fixing them, convincing them, or changing them. Boundaries are about protecting you, respecting you, and reclaiming the parts of yourself you've given away for too long. The real choice lies with you. That's the part that feels both empowering and terrifying. Because when you're caught in a cycle of hurt, it's easier to keep focusing on them. You ask yourself, will they change? Will they finally understand? Will they ever treat me differently? It feels safer to keep the spotlight on their behavior. Because if the answer is yes, then maybe you don't have to make any hard decisions. Maybe you can just hold on long enough and everything will fix itself. But waiting for someone else to decide your worth keeps you stuck in the same loop. The shift only comes when you stop asking what they will do and start asking what you will choose. Every time they hurt you, there's a decision point whether you acknowledge it or not. Do you accept it? Do you excuse it? Do you rationalize it away? Or do you finally say, this isn't what I want for my life? The choice isn't easy. There are ties, shared histories, maybe even financial or family obligations that complicate everything. But even with those complexities, the truth doesn't change. The cycle can only continue if you keep choosing to stay in it. And that choice doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. Because all of us crave love, connection, stability. All of us want to believe in second chances. But there comes a time when you realize that choosing them again and again means choosing against yourself. The hardest part about making a different choice is that it forces you to confront loss. You have to let go of the fantasy of who you thought they could be. You have to grieve the vision you built in your mind of a better future together. And grief is painful. That's why so many people stay. It feels easier to tolerate the ongoing pain you know than to face the sharp pain of loss. But here's the reality: the pain of staying doesn't end. It repeats, it compounds, it deepens. The pain of leaving, while devastating, creates space for healing. One keeps you trapped, the other sets you free. You might wonder, but what if I make the wrong choice? What if I walk away and they finally change after I'm gone? That fear keeps you locked in place, replaying endless scenarios of what could be. But ask yourself this: how many chances have you already given? How many cycles have you already endured? If change were truly going to happen, wouldn't you have seen it by now? Waiting for them to transform keeps you investing in a future that may never exist instead of building the life that's right in front of you. Choice also means responsibility, and responsibility can feel heavy because if you admit that the choice lies with you, then you can't keep pretending you're powerless. You can't keep blaming them for your unhappiness while refusing to take action. That's the discomfort of empowerment. It requires you to own your part, not in their behavior, but in how you respond to it. It forces you to admit, I may not be able to stop them from hurting me, but I can stop giving them the chance to keep doing it. And here's the deeper truth: choice is where your power lies. As long as you believe you don't have a choice, you'll stay stuck. You'll tell yourself stories about obligation, about love, about duty, until you convince yourself you're trapped. But you're not trapped. You may have difficult decisions ahead, sacrifices to make, grief to walk through, but you are not powerless. You can choose boundaries. You can choose distance. You can choose yourself. The question is, how much longer are you willing to abandon yourself for the sake of holding on to someone else? Every time you silence your needs, every time you dismiss your pain, every time you justify their behavior, you're making a choice. You're choosing them over you. And over time, that choice chips away at your sense of self until you don't even recognize the person staring back at you in the mirror. The good news is you can make a different choice at any point. Today, tomorrow, a year from now. You can decide that your peace is worth more than their chaos, your dignity worth more than their approval, your healing worth more than the illusion of love. The real choice has never been about them. It has always been about you. About whether you believe you are worthy of a life that doesn't revolve around being hurt, about whether you're willing to step into the unknown to claim something better. It's not easy, but it's yours. And until you embrace that truth, the cycle will keep spinning. And so, when you step back and look at the whole picture, it becomes clear the hurt will repeat as long as you keep giving it room. Hope and forgiveness alone won't rewrite the pattern. Boundaries are the act of choosing yourself, and the ultimate power has always been in your hands. You are not powerless. You are not broken. And you are not destined to live in cycles of pain. The choice to end it, the choice to protect your peace, the choice to honor your worth, it has always been yours. And when you finally claim that truth, that is when the cycle stops. And that is when your healing truly begins.